Welcome to the Bladtcast. I am Christian Bladt, as always, and very excited today to be joined by Mark Farner, whom some of you will recognize, of course, as the voice of Grand Funk Railroad. Mark, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Christian, good to be here with you, brother.
Yeah, now I have to ask, how often do people assume your name is Mark Farmer? Because until I saw it in print, I thought your name was Mark Farmer. Not saw it in print today, but
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed to say at what age I was when I realized your name was Mark Farner.
Yeah. Well, Farner with an N like Nelson.
Yeah.
Farner is Nordic for one who farns. But it just so happens I did plant garlic yesterday. I am a farmer. I come by it honestly, Christian.
So you're a farner and a farmer. So either way that it's pronounced, obviously it's not a lie, but I will make sure to call you Mark Farner. No, reading through your notes, you're originally from Flint, Michigan, which I think has this reputation as a place that turns out fairly, tough people. Obviously, there's a whole Detroit scene with people like Ted Nugent, the MC5, etc. But what should people know about Flint, Michigan that they maybe don't know already?
That it's not just about the water.
Oh, yeah.
It's about the people that live there, because my mother moved to Flint, Michigan as a 16-year-old girl. The whole family came from Leachville, Arkansas, and we had friends from Mississippi, Louisiana, Georgia, North and South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky. We had a lot of Southern friends who brought instruments. When they moved to get the high-paying auto factory jobs in Michigan, they brought their instruments with them. And although, a lot of those jobs are gone, the factories took their leave, the families are still here.
Sure.
The music is still part of our historical past, because it took the North and the South coming together in the spirit of love to make that kind of music. And all the music that came out of Michigan, I'm very proud to be from this state, man, and to be from this lower deck kind of music.
I think it's a great way to, to describe it. Obviously, more recent years, you have Kid Rock and Eminem, different kinds of music. And, I think what I like about those guys is that they have probably the opposite worldview politically, but they interact on social media, wish each other happy birthday. And it's like, yeah, that's the way it should be.
Right.
I mentioned Ted Nugent in passing, and it's unfortunate that when you talk about Ted Nugent, people right away want to talk about his politics. And I'm like, look, that's a big part of who he is, but is a hell of a guitar player, and I'm not saying don't think what you want about him, but look at the whole picture when it looks at somebody like that. And
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And, one of my favorites, I know he put his band together out on the West Coast, but I know Alice Cooper's from there too. So
that's right.
I'm from New York State originally, but some of these Michiganders seem like my kind of people. So glad to get to talk to you. So people know, obviously, Grand Funk Railroad, the songs are still with us 50, 55 years later. But I don't know if people understand just how big the band was. It's always a nice little trivia fact, maybe a feather in your hat, that the Grand Funk Railroad didn't just sell out Shea Stadium. They sold it out faster than the Beatles, right?
That's right. 71 hours, I think it was, and it took the Beatles 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tremendous. And again, as somebody who grew up in New York, Shea Stadium is one of those old stadiums that had 56,000 seats. So it's not like selling out a basketball arena. That's quite an accomplishment. So I love the idea that George, Paul, John, and Ringo had to keep getting updates on the ticket count, and you guys were like, all right, that gig's already gone clean. We're fine.
And that was back when there was no Ticketron, no kind of online sales. There was no online going on. And every ticket that was sold, Christian, came through that box office at Shea.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even when I was a kid growing up in the late '80s and early '90s, obviously you had to wait in a line when tickets went on sale. You know, you could go to like a Tower Records, stuff like that, but if you were lucky, you could wait out at that. You could camp out at the box office, and in a way, it's nice that it's easy to get tickets now. But by making them easier to get, Mark, they're a lot harder to get because now everybody can try and get them.
Yeah.
And some of them aren't fans. They're just, people who work for StubHub or Vivid Seats or whatever, just trying to gobble them up. And
yeah, man, I hear you.
Yeah. So obviously people know there's plenty of songs in the discography of Grand Funk Railroad. We're an American Band, of course, is one up there at the top. It might be the first one people think of, but you have those songs. You have a few covers we'll talk about that you guys popularized.
Yeah.
Is it challenging, to have songs that have been a part of your life for that long? And if somebody's like, oh yeah, I want to go see Mark Farner's American Band, which is the way you tour now, if they weren't to see one of those songs, you'd probably hear about it, wouldn't you?
Oh yeah. I definitely play those songs. That's part of who I am.
Yeah.
And, the covers like you're mentioning there, with Locomotion is some kind of wonderful, man. It's like that's part of the fingerprint of Grand Funk, and they will always be in my set, along with I'm Your Captain and Bad Time to Be in Love, man.
Bad Time was one of the songs that I found out about, because I'm sure you're aware of this. In the 90s, Guns N' Roses, before they would play Sweet Child of Mine, actually would come out and do like a verse of Bad Time. And in those days, it was like, how do I find out what that song is? Because again, I couldn't look it up on the internet, Mark. And my dad was like, oh, you're listening to Grand Funk? I'm like, no, this is Guns N' Roses. You know this song? He's like, so my dad had all the records upstairs. So my dad had a great record collection from like the mid 60s. It ended right in 1974 when he got married. But up until 1974, he had a little bit of everything.
That's great.
It was a lot of fun to go, because again, when you don't have a Spotify or an Apple Music, it's like, oh, I want to hear all 6 Doors records and all the Stones records from that era. Just go up there and listen, which is great.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned Locomotion, and, in putting the notes together, of course, I remembered that. I was kind of curious as to how successful the song was. So the age I am, the first version I ever heard of Locomotion was Kylie Minogue, because that was on the pop radio, and I heard that song. Right. And then I heard your version. I'm like, oh, I like this one a lot better. But so it's one of these rare songs that was in the top 3 on the American charts in 1962 for Little Eva, 1974 for Grand Funk Railroad, which actually went to number 1. So did Little Eva, and Kylie Minogue only went to number 3. I'm sure in Australia, though, it was like whatever, like 1 with like 10 stars after it.
Right.
And it's great to sort of think that like a song like that, it works for some really different audiences. I think it's interesting. Grand Funk, sort of the connective tissue between Little Eva and Kylie Minogue and her pop version.
Yeah.
But when I was looking at Some Kind of Wonderful, it wasn't a huge hit for the original artist, but the thing that shouldn't have surprised me, it was co-written by Carole King, who, of course, wrote so many songs before she was ever a recording artist. So when you hear a great song from that era, you should never be surprised that it's by Carole King. But I was, you know? So how do you find that song? In my understanding, it wasn't a huge hit. The artist who did it was called Soul Brothers 6.
That's right.
Yeah.
And John Ellison, who actually wrote the song, him and I are great friends now. He has thanked me for doing the song and making it a hit. And I actually went down to West Virginia and presented John with his West Virginia Music Hall of Fame award for that song. And I got to sing the second verse with him on stage at the award ceremony. Talk about pinch me, dude.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So Yeah, well, it's always good to hear, that you play the songs that people expect to hear. Every once in a while, you'll see one of those bands. It's like, we're not playing our big hit. We're doing all the new stuff, and it's like, oh, come on. It's always disappointing. And,
Yeah.
years ago, I heard Paul Stanley from Kiss kind of sum it up in a way is like, every concert is somebody's first time seeing you.
Mhm.
So even if maybe you do get tired of one of those, and it's great to hear that you don't, Mark, but
Right.
it's like, if somebody doesn't hear that, that's going to really be a letdown, and you want to make sure that everybody gets what they want.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I was reading about there obviously Grand Funk ends and there's some stops and starts. Some of your time as a solo artist, though, I was interested to read about you had some success doing contemporary Christian music. And talk a little bit about sort of that journey. In the notes for what I was reading, it said it coincides with you're being a born again Christian. So talk a little bit about you know producing music for rock radio and obviously rock albums, but then also the different approach you might take to do a contemporary Christian recording.
Yeah, we up here we call it God rock.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah.
And it's not like the music that I made was to go to play to Christians in a church. A lot of people do that with the Christian music industry. I remained in the bars and the nightclubs and wherever I could go and play music. I played in a maximum security prison in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Wow.
I played to 500 inmates, man. It was one of the best audiences I ever had.
Hey, if it's good enough for Johnny Cash, it's good enough for you, right?
You got it, brother. You talk about an appreciative audience, Christian, man.
Oh,
Yeah. And it's like when I go to play for the troops, you play for the troops, man, those guys really appreciate you and they show it to you. So the stuff that I did that was Christian oriented, because I'm not a big church guy. I think the modern day churches have it wrong. Just my take on it. And I like going to wherever I go and just loving on people and blending in, not sticking out like a sore thumb, but being part of the continuity to sow some love into it, man, because I really got some good love, man. I got the genuine article in my heart. Yeah. And I've already checked out of my bone suit back in 2012. I died twice, and I know what it's like, and I know where I'm going, and I'm going home. It's like I'm going to go back to where I started from. That's what it felt like when I left this bone suit. But when I came back into it the second time, I was shown that debt consciousness, not just financial debt, but that has to be considered among the debts that we have, but the unfulfilled expectations of other people upon us, and even we hold ourselves in regret for having done something or not having done something, but we hold ourselves in debt, and debt is like the worst, the most foul 4-letter word, brother Christian, in the language, in anybody's language, because we're not going to set ourselves free. We're not going to do what Bob Marley told us to do and emancipate ourselves.
Yeah.
We're going to stay, indebted to, and we're going to be a slave to that indebtedness. But we are the only ones who can set ourselves free. And when we wake up, and I hope people are waking up, I see it around where I'm going. I see people are waking up to this indebtedness because it's part of our imagination. It's not like you can go down to the drugstore and buy yourself a box of it and dump it on the kitchen table, see what it looks like, or buy a 10-yard dump full of it and have them back up and dump it in your front yard and wade through that stuff so you get a good feel for it. No, it's all here, this indebtedness. So we have to come to the grips with it and set ourselves free, let ourselves off the hook, because we are some pretty nice little shits down in there.
Which I think is a great way to sum it up. Is yeah, absolutely some pretty good little shits down in there. One other thing that jumped out was you were honored. This was in the late '90s, but you were honored by the Lakota Sioux elders in 1999. This is sort of honoring your native ancestry and contributions. And I was reading about that, and you've been honored by the Cherokee Honor Society as well, and these are in South Dakota, these organizations. And it reminded me, and so I looked it up before I talked to you. I remember when I moved from New York to Los Angeles, and believe me, it'll all come together in a second. I drove cross country from New York to LA in 2003, and I stopped off in South Dakota because I want to see Mount Rushmore, but I had heard about this Crazy Horse Memorial, and it was so amazing. And I looked, and I was just like, oh yeah, they were kind of in the early stages. And I'm looking at it, and they've finished his hand last year, and this hand is enormous. I'm like, how big is this thing going to be?
Wow.
And it's such an amazing look. And look, the thing about Mount Rushmore is the time in which they made it, and you can see the videos of them blasting dynamite. I don't know how as many people survived as they did.
Yeah.
But this is like modern, and it's so impressive. So it just made me want to kind of talk about sort of that community and getting to be a part of it, and being celebrated. So I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on all of that, Mark.
Well, the Cherokee Nation is the 14th northeast counties in Oklahoma. And when I received the Medal of Honor, I was there in Tahlequah, which is the capital for the tribe. There is the museum that goes through, as you go through the Trail of Tears. That museum is set up there. It is something that I believe people need to go through it and just experience what my native ancestors went through to get to Tahlequah, driven out of their home back in Tennessee, and it was shattering. It was soul shattering for many people. And my great grandmother, her name was Elizabeth Koone Jones. She married a New York City Jew. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And I think that, I mean, it sounds like, sort of an amazing thing to kind of see any sort of memorial or museum to something like that. And, it's reminded of how sometimes learning about history is incredibly, it's not fun, but it's so moving, like going to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., things like that, and it's, my kids are little, they're 9 and 7. So when we learn about America, it's the fun way. One day we'll take them for stuff like that. But it's great to know that things are out there that, and I'm glad that you were able to be celebrated, and sort of your legacy for your grandmother. That all sounds great. One other thing before we talk about the new album, which is great. I noticed that in the 90s, you were one of the members of Ringo Starr's All-Star Band. And it had Randy Bachman, John Entwistle, who people know from The Who. Felix Cavaliere, I think is how you say his name. I interviewed him once, so I saw his name on there, and I'm like, oh my God, he was a great guy.
Yeah, yes.
And of course, Ringo and Billy Preston was there too.
Yeah,
Talk about that experience. It always seems like, you'll see the list for Ringo's All-Star Band. I think he still does it, and you'll look and you're like, these are like, this is it really is an all-star band,
Yeah, man. And to be with all those guys, and to have Mark Rivera in there too, who is a great, percussionist. He did the congas and did acoustic guitar. He did background vocals. He was just a guy that could do it all. And to have him in the band too, it really made it easy to change and do things, you know, and to watch Ringo go from out front singing, you know, and doing the Yellow Submarine and doing some of the songs, you know, the Beatles things,
Sure.
then going back and setting on the drum kit and playing drums to Locomotion, you know, and I turn around, I'm looking, and there's Zach sitting there, his son Zach, and then he's on the second kit, and there's two, you know, father son back there, great drummers, famous drummers, and here I am out in front of them playing my song. It was like, pinch me, dude.
Oh yeah, I mean that has to be amazing for any of the musicians that get to do it. So that's why I wanted to ask about it, because it really seemed like that. So as I mentioned, you're still out there with Mark Farner's American Band is the touring entity that you have. But I do want to talk to you about the new album, Closer to My Home, which again is great, and it's available now. And when it came to I'm Your Captain, parentheses, Closer to My Home, you did a new record. Oh, there it is right there. Exactly. And you're holding it up for our video audience. You did a new recording of the song because it commemorated 55 years since you first did that. And I'm not lying to you, Mark. I got that recording first. I thought that they had sent me an old version, and I'm like, well, this can't be what this guy sounds like now. And I only say that because I want to compliment you. It sounded amazing. And I'm like, this is incredible that this guy still sounds this great. But talk about, obviously, you know, you've been playing the song for 55 years live, but talk about approaching doing it in a studio again after all this time.
Well, the recording, you know, back then it was done on I think it was a 16 track. We weren't even doing 24 track yet when we did that song. But we had, you know, Terry Knight was our manager and producer, and Tommy Baker from the Upbeat show in Cleveland, Ohio. He was the band leader on the Upbeat show, and that was like, you know, it was kind of like American Bandstand. Remember, that's, you know, they'd play the songs, and some of the artists would come in and lip sync their songs, and well, that's the same kind of deal. But Tommy Baker, man, wow, he wrote all of that instrumentation for I'm Your Captain, and he did it because he was hearing it, you know, he loved that song so much. And he told me, he says, Farner, when you get to the end of that song and you're going through those refrains, I'm getting closer to my home. He said, I want you to keep going over and over and over. And when you think you can't do another one, give me 10 more. And so we did. And it went on, you know, for 10 minutes, and a lot of disc jockeys from back in the day. Now, this is when AM was, everybody's playing hits on AM radio, and then FM kind of started, and you got these disc jockeys, no commercials. They're playing all this music, and they'd put on I'm Your Captain, you know, the full length version, not the single version. And over the years, and even up in the last time I was out and I went to a radio station, this guy had been on the air for 50 years, you know, that he's celebrating that much time on the air. He said, and I want to thank you, Mark, because whenever I needed to take a leak or eat a sandwich or get a coffee, or, you know, I smoke a cigarette, I could get it all done in that song.
I love that. And you know, I guess it's good for getting those sort of things done. And if it's album oriented and you need a lot of time, let's just say the bathroom trip might take a little longer than you were planning. You can always go, all right, well, here's Jethro Tull's Thick as a Brick. And you'll be back in like 45 minutes. So, yeah, it's interesting to think about. And, you know, you hear people that worked in those early days of FM radio, you know, what was considered album oriented before it started transitioning to being, you know, basically what AM had been. You know, I grew up in the age of top 40 And by that point, even like great radio stations in New York City, like WNEW, which has been gone for a long time now, even that, it was like, well, we play rock, but we kind of play the same 40 rock songs the same way that the pop stations play the same 40 pop songs. So it's fun when you get to hear some of the disc jockeys from, you know, an earlier era doing shows like on satellite radio now, where they're literally allowed to whatever you want to play. And you can really hear some great stuff. But I'm sure that I'm sure that there were a lot of disc jockeys who appreciated the length of that. So some of the other songs on the album, you actually collaborated with two people that I've been fortunate enough to interview in the past. Talk about working with Jim Peterick, who people know from Ides of March and Survivor. And I'm just going to assume you've known him for a long time. I know Dennis DeYoung worked with him for a long time as well. So he's definitely one of those guys that's keeping really busy. But talk about working with him on this album, Mark.
Well, I met Peterick when I did the Moody Blues cruise years ago. And Peterick, of course, was on there with the Ides. And I talked to him briefly, and he said, you know, I'd like to have you come and do the world stage with me. And I said, what is that? And he tells me, you know, that we get up and we play ours, and then we invite a special guest to come out, and then we'll play your music, and you can play your guitar and sing, and, you know, just do this. We have special guests that come in and do this kind of thing. I said, well, you know, sign me up. I'd like to do it, because I felt right at home talking with Peterick. He's a great guy. I have the greatest respect for him as a songwriter, and went to his place near Chicago, you know, recorded Friends Forever. We did vocal there, and the drums, Peterick's son did the drums track there. And then when we were ready, we're going to put it on my album. Mark Slaughter said, have them send the stems, which is a digital track, send the stems, and I will remix it to sound like this record. So it has a relationship to the rest of the songs on this album. And it was great to work with those guys, and to know, see, I'm glad somebody else is doing that, because if you put me in charge of a computer, I'm going to crash it. Not on purpose. It just happens.
So what you're saying, Mark, is if somebody said, I'm going to send you the stems, you would think it would probably go back to the farming out in the front yard, right?
That's right.
Well, it's interesting you brought up Mark Slaughter, because he's somebody that I've had a chance to talk to a couple of times. And, you know, he's, in the grand scheme of things, he's a newer artist, but of course he's been at it for like 35 years, going back to the Vinnie Vincent invasion, and really down to earth guy, has a great sense for music, you know, of his era. But, you know, I'm sure that he was excited to be working with you guys. And I guess, you know, at a certain point, there's just sort of that thing that people get excited, like, oh yeah, you know, I would totally love to work with you. And so, in addition to sort of taking the stems, and I guess the best way to describe that is people listening to you and I talk right now, I can actually separate this into two stems. I can have a track that is me talking and a track that is you talking. And I can kind of take out some of the noise in that way. But with music, I can't even imagine how many stems. You're talking about old 24 track recordings.
Yeah.
It could be hundreds of different layers to each song.
Exactly.
And yeah.
Yeah.
So talk about, so Mark wrote a song called Same Game. Is he a part of the recording of it, or did he just write that song?
No, he's on Anymore as far as the writing.
Oh, I see.
It's the first song on side A, Anymore. And I mean, of this, yeah.
Oh yeah.
There's 9 songs on this, and 10 songs on the CD, but Anymore right here. We were doing it. It's one that I'd written a few years back when my son was alive, Jesse, and he was having this protocol done on him. He was quadriplegic and he was on life support. And every morning, the team would get him ready, wash him up, get him in a sling, bring him over, drop him down easy in the power chair. And then he could drive the power chair with a sip and puff with his mouth. And anyways, they're getting him ready, doing the protocol on him in the morning. And I'm sitting out in the living room of our house and I'm playing my acoustic and I start writing this song. I just start playing these chords. And then when I went in and I saw Jesse after his protocol, he says, "Dad, what was that song you were singing?" I said, "It's called Anymore." I said, it's one that I'm just starting to work on. I'm writing it now. He says, "Well, I'm telling you, it's going to be a hit." And I said, my 20-some-year-old kid is telling me my song's going to be a hit. I didn't even know he ever listened to any of my songs. I never told my kids to listen to my stuff or even encourage them. I want them to listen to what they like,
Right, but that has to be great to hear that from him, and glad that you're sort of able to share that moment with him. I've for our visual audience, I've got some evidence of there's a red vinyl version of the album, but I think the CD is the one that has an extra song on it, though. So
yes, that's the one with Friends Forever.
Right. Okay. So so the album came out this fall, right? It came out recently, actually, but it's available now is the important thing, right?
Yes, November 8th was the release.
Yeah.
The single out November 11th is doing good. It's Real. The name of the song is Real. It's 57 on the what it said, the Facebook chart of releases. There are new releases. It's like, so it's moving up.
Yeah, no, that's great. And obviously people can go to markfarner.com, even though we established you do some farming, but it is Farner, FARNER.com.
That's right.
And they can go on Facebook and find Mark Farner's American Band, official Mark Farner on YouTube. Before I let you go, a moment ago, you were talking about it was the Moody Blues Cruise that you met Jim Peterick, and I think they call it something different now. But I saw on your list, your itinerary for next year, you're going to be on something called the Rock and Romance Cruise, and it looks like it's already sold out. So if people are thinking of going, they just have to join the wait list. But it made me think about, obviously for fans, it's great because you get to see all these different bands, but what's it like being on one of those cruises where, sometimes it might be somebody that you've been a fan of forever, but never met, somebody your path hasn't crossed in 20 years. Talk a little bit about being, on one of those music cruises.
Well, it's, for me, it was a good, experience. The first one I went on ever went from Stockholm, Sweden to Helsinki and back.
Wow.
And dude, 11 floors. Every time you get on an elevator, you're with people that they were just like, they didn't have glasses with a drink in it. They just tipped the bottle up. Everyone had their own bottle. And I'm walking down through there. They got so sloshed out of the buckets. I looking and people are just laying all over the ship. And there's people that are so drunk, they're putting their cigarettes out in the carpet, man. And I'm thinking, I said to the promoter, I said, how the hell do you clean this car? How do you clean this boat? He says, we don't. We strip it all out and put new carpet in. I go, what? So that's when Leslie West was on that cruise as well. And I was great friends with Brother Leslie. He was a good soul. And
Leslie, I set up an interview with him once. I used to produce a radio show with the comedian Dennis Miller, and he was a big fan of Leslie, so we had him on. But I used to, just as a fan, I mean, he used to be on with Howard Stern all the time in the old like regular radio days, and he, to say that Leslie was a character is an understatement, but in the best way possible. He was such an entertaining guy. And also, just such a talented musician. And, his health problems later in life were pretty well documented. But he had a sense of humor about it, too, which it's like he'd make jokes that you'd never even think in your head. And he'd go ahead and say it out loud. So Leslie was a great guy. That must have been fun to get to hang out with him. And, this cruise next year, who knows who you'll get to hang out with. I hope that in general on these music cruises, people don't put their cigarettes out on the carpet anymore. But you know what, Mark? I don't know. I know some people who every year perform on the Monsters of Rock cruise, which it's a little bit of a rough crowd. So, if I had to guess, there's probably occasionally a cigarette burn or two in the carpets on the Monsters of Rock cruise.
If you had to guess.
If I had to guess, yeah. And I might even be able to guess a couple of people who would be responsible. Well, Mark, it's been delightful getting a chance to talk to you. Wonderful to meet you. And just sort of get to share your story and share the album that, as we've been talking about this whole time, Closer to My Home is available on a very stylish red vinyl, but also the CD version has the bonus track. And I want to give all of the social media plugs one more time. MarkFarner.com. Facebook has Mark Farner's American Band, and YouTube official Mark Farner. Mark, thank you so much for spending some time with me. I really appreciate it. Love the record. Best of luck with it. And I hope I get a chance to talk to you again sometime soon.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Christian. Good to be with you here on Bladtcast. God bless you. If I don't see you in the future, I'll see you in the pasture.
That's perfect. Thanks so much.